Hello and welcome to the Sport for Change dialogues. I'm Parminder Gill. As a quick background, this platform has been designed to curate and showcase exemplary stories, interventions, and campaigns narrated by change makers themselves to improve societal outcomes through sport and beyond. In our first episode, we spoke with Annie George of Decathlon on how Decathlon is using sport as part of their business sustainability strategy. For some of you who missed it, it's available as a link on the Sports Village Foundation website. For this episode of Sports for Change Dialogue, our special guest today is Neelam Babar Desai. Neelam is the head of sports at Tata Trusts, which is, as most of you know, is one of the most well-known philanthropic institutions in the country. And more importantly for us, it has been deeply associated with and invested in the development of sport in the country for many decades now. Our objective for the time at hand today, for next 40 to 45 odd minutes, is to understand how Trusts approaches sport from both excellence and developmental standpoint, and how organizations or leaders, some of you joining in, can integrate sport into their core business mandate for driving change in the communities you serve, whether it is through the vehicle of CSR, ESG, sustainability, or social marketing. All in all, it promises to be a riveting session. So buckle your seatbelts and enjoy the ride. Neelam, welcome to the Sport for Change Dialogues.
Hi, thank you, Parminder. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Great. Let me start a bit from your personal journey into the development space. I know that, and many of us know that you have been a national level gymnast and athlete yourself. We would be very keen to understand the journey from there into development. Was it planned, or was it a series of accidents, what I call them a series of misadventures that got you here?
Frankly, it started with gymnastics, Parminder. I mean, though I was a competitive gymnast, but when I quite at a young age, I had kind of decided that I would get into coaching. So even at the age of 12, 13, I was already coaching small kids in summer camps and in my institute. Yes. And all. So when I started coaching, though initially the focus was developing competitive gymnasts, I soon realized that that is not what it should be. I mean, if you look at gymnastics, it is the mother of all sports. It's considered as a mother of all sports. And unfortunately, very rarely in institutions around me, I could see that it was more focusing on developing those competitive athletes. So that's when I made the change, right? I think I would say around 22, 23 years ago, when I started my own institute. I started teaching in my own institute. It was not my own. It was, of course, in Prabodhankar Thackeray, a sport training institute in Villeparle East. That's where I started my center. That time I had decided that I'm not going to focus on gymnastics as a competitive sport, but looking at it as a developmental sport. It took me around 12 to 13 years to get to a stage where I could set it up as a developmental institute, because it was very difficult to find coaches of the same mindset. But see, it's competitive. You know, I could take one gymnast, stay with them for 10, 12 years, and probably get them to a stage, a medal winner, and that's how the story normally is, right? And you get a Chhatrapati award, and that's it. I mean, that's the cycle typically that follows. But I decided I don't want to stick with one. I want to do as many children as possible, reach out to as many children as possible. So in my own institute, I started with that developmental gymnastics, and then had the layered approach to get into competition. So I always felt that I will get competitive athletes as a byproduct of, you know, teaching or reaching out to many students at the young age, at the bottom of the pyramid. And I was, I mean, as I said, it took me about 12, 13 years to get here, but now I can already see the success. I mean, the past 4 or 5 years, COVID, of course, had played spoil sport, but otherwise, we have competitive players in every age group till the age of 15. So we have right from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So which is the ladder, which is required. So, and out of them, I know that there'll be 4 or 5 who will get to the top. The rest, there has to be a pathway. And the pathway is also something which we have thought about and that we've shared with the parents right from the beginning, that at some point you need to decide whether the child should continue in competitive gymnastics or get into some other sports. And that's how we move them. So that's how I looked at sports everywhere. I mean, I feel we should look at it in that way, where it has to be developmental recreation at the pyramid at the bottom, where we get more and more children to participate and focus, and then looking at their strengths, guide them whether they want that if they get into competitive or not, then either continue as recreation for fitness and health, and or maybe move them into other sports. So that's I would say my journey which I've applied, and that's how I looked at programs whenever as when I joined the trust.
Sure. Great, thanks. And that brings me to the next question, an important one, and maybe continuation of what you just mentioned on how the trust approach sport. What has been the key driver and vision? All of us know the deep investments of trust in sports for a very, very long time. But what has been the driver around it, the vision around it? And also maybe some of us may be keen to understand, this is just a philanthropic initiative, or does it also combine or use in some form the CSR mandates of Tata Group firms? Maybe some clarity on that along with the overall context will help.
In the trust, I would say sports again started off as a byproduct of education, if you ask me. We were working with children in certain regions in the education vertical, and in some of the regions we saw that many of the children playing outside, not all of them coming to school regularly. We saw them more engaged in playing some specific sport which was culturally driven. An example being, it started with hockey, frankly. So our Jharkhand hockey grassroots program is one of the oldest, about 4 years now, or 4 to 5 years. We started in 2015, so around 5-6 years, where we saw them playing, and we saw that there was a culture of playing hockey. It was a way of connecting with the community. The community all came together to actually organize tournaments, to celebrate playing first. And that's when we said, oh, then that's a great way to engage children, or see if we can, connect with the children better. And that's how our program started. That okay, let's look at it as the sports angle, as we see. That's how hockey started in Jharkhand. That's how football started in Mizoram, because again, there we could see the rich culture of playing within the community, and we saw the children playing, and we knew there were a few successes already, even from Jharkhand as well as hockey, where many years ago we could see some players who have emerged. So after working with them in the grassroots for a while, we realized that we need to give them more. I mean, it cannot be just engaging them for better connect with the community as well as the children, but if we can really train them better and maybe equip them with better technique, equipments, maybe a bit of infrastructure if required, and provide them an opportunity where they can create or make a livelihood out of sports, either as a player or even for the youth in the community who were, erstwhile players, and make them trainers, make them coaches. So we had to actually conduct coach education workshops to actually train them so that they can be a part of our program. So creating livelihood opportunities as sports, making the community aware that this also could be an option, which is really what helped us connect better with the communities and the parents, especially the girls. I mean, the participation of the girls was very important for us, and it's only because of we having trainers from their communities, their localites. They could see them as role models, that we were able to get the trust from the community to send their children for our play. So that's how it developed. So um, uh, if you ask me, initially when they started off, the thought process was there that we needed to use sports to develop the basic abilities or for holistic development of children, if you ask me, and to see if we can engage them better as a part of the education. Somewhere along the way, they realize, oh, this the competitive exposure also, or providing them some means to get them to a competitive levels also could be a great way to engage them better, because we could see the talent. So there was a lot of talent out there in the grassroots, and that's how the excellence programs came into being, saying that, okay, so now that we have talent, we are grooming them at some level, we are engaging with them, so how can we take them to the next level? And and hence partnerships, which you rightly mentioned, with the Tata Group companies. So Tata Steel came into play because in Jharkhand, Tata Steel is the strongest uh, uh, organization institute there. We know in Jamshedpur, they have their own setup already. So we thought, okay, if you're having grassroots in Jharkhand, the best of them, then there has to be some way in which they can get groomed for the competitive levels, and that's how the partnership with Tata Steel happened, where we said, let's put up a Naval Tata Hockey Academy, the Excellence Center in Jamshedpur, and groom the talent there, not just for the players but also for the coaches. So we had coaches in our academy, in our NTHA, which were few of them were from the grassroots. So it was a huge, I would say, an opportunity for them where they could see it. So this was the pattern, and with that vision, we said, okay, can we do something like that in other sports also? So football started off in the Northeast. Again, all of these regions, where these regions, there were no, I mean, it was Mizoram, you would say they were, sporting culture was there. So there were many, football was already being played, at, but all of these were at a, I would say, not at the grassroots. They were engagement of the youth and even seniors. It was played as a recreation. Badminton started off in that way, where you could see a lot of them, a lot of the adults engaging in play of badminton in the community centers post at the end of the day. So the love was there, the passion was there. In badminton, the grassroots infrastructure was there. Football, the grassroots infrastructure was there, where the football fields were already available. So we said, okay, let's complement those things with our existing, with better training, with better equipment, with a structured coach education program. And that's, I would say, is the real philosophy of the trust programs. See what is existing in those regions of engagement. Uh, find out what are the strengths. I mean, can we get local trainers there? Can we look at grooming them so that they themselves get a career opportunity within the same region, as well as we get better. We don't have to get them from outside. It's better. It's economical, obviously. Not to mention the brings about a closer connect with the community, and then provide ways in which either we provide an excellence setup, or we connect with whatever is existing in the ecosystem there, and see that our talent gets a way to way to nurture ahead. So that's how the philosophy would be.
Great. I think you touched upon some key elements as part of the vision strategy. One, of course, the start was in education,
Yeah.
and moving on to sports excellence, grassroots sports, sports excellence, livelihoods, employment opportunities, youth development, and leadership. We might have some business or CSR leaders part of this episode. So, based on your experience so far, from another organization standpoint, if you were to look at sport, right, what might be the ways in which organizations can look at integrating sport as part of their broader outreach, whether it is touching their consumers, employees, partners, and communities that they serve through, like I mentioned, either CSR or sustainability or social marketing mandates. Any inputs would be helpful given your experience.
Frankly, I see a lot of engagement, trying to engage the employees using sports. I mean, I see that in many companies. I mean, uh, Tata companies, non-Tata companies. I mean, one of our partners, Indocin, they also. So there's a lot of engagement of youth for using sports. So engagement of employees, I'm sorry. Now, community, consumer connect. Frankly, sports is one of those themes I feel, it can get linked with anything. I mean, if I really want to engage with youth, yeah, I can. Getting them together, creating that social connect, providing a platform where they can easily exchange ideas and build the teamwork. And we know that sports for development is excellent examples that we've seen all across the world, which can bring together people or kids, youth from different backgrounds and help them gel together and create a wonderful uh, uh, ecosystem within the community to play with. So that's one. The children, of course, uh, again, some of them who have a mandate, they look at uh, either life skill development or education. They have health, but if you ask if or they have livelihood. Now, if you have all of these four themes which I spoke about, we can integrate sports within it. Education, well, sports is an integral part of education. I mean, I don't know why and how we have managed to separate them out, but well, it is an integral part. I mean, there are so many things which sports can teach so easily, uh, which through education it might, I mean, through academics, I would not say education, through academics it might be a little difficult. uh, and that's where, physical literacy, integration of physical literacy within education is a paramount important. So definitely, whoever has an education mandate can easily integrate physical literacy within the same, and see some excellent outcomes, because uh, many of the places, difficult places where children do not like to come to school and sit and study, right? If you teach them the same concept through play, smaller games, I mean, they just love it. You would see the difference where they can want to come to school. Then, in that case, that difference can be brought about. Uh, so we have education, integration, health. I mean, we're putting in so much money into, illness or prevention of illness or sickness. Or once you get ill, then you have you cancer care, and you have so many others where you are setting up hospitals. I mean, those are necessary. I'm not saying no, but a simple way of preventive, medicine, I would say, or better health or for better immunity, we all know, is exercise, right? So getting children to, and exercising is something, I would say, as adults we say exercise. For some young children, it has to be play. They don't like to exercise multiple times, right? But if you tell them to play, they will continue playing forever and ever, right? So for them to develop the habit and the love for doing an activity for a prolonged period, especially when they are in their youth, you need to develop that. You need to provide them that opportunity to play in the younger age group, right? So that's why the grassroots programs becomes very important, either as an in-school program or as a community program, and somewhere where the children can go and play. Unfortunately, today only people who have the money to spend on private academies, they get the opportunity, right? Very few grassroots programs where they can uh, play with that at free of cost or at minimal cost, I would say, if not free. So that's your health, livelihood. I mean, by engaging the local youth, you can create those opportunities. And again, sports as an industry, we never looked at sports as an industry in India, right? So we've just looked at, I mean, we need to start looking at, that's what we need to learn from our counterparts. Cricket is an industry, but other than cricket, no, I don't know if there's any. Badminton and tennis and all of these are slowly, steadily coming up. But other than that, it's not an industry. So how do we develop that, and creating entrepreneurs around it uh, are some of the thought processes we need to think about. So livelihood there, so you have uh, three main themes, which if I look at many of the CSR mandates, they are part of it, right? Education, you have health, and you have livelihood. So this is where we can integrate them and say that we are also using sports to do it. And of course, sports, specific sports, again, that could be the excellence part of it.
Sure.
Where we are working actively to develop competitive level or national icons, as we see, which are also important. I mean, I would say uh, you need to have those icons to get participation or engagement of people at the grassroots level. Today, because of these individual icons, we have so many of them doing gymnastics, we have so many of them doing playing badminton, we have so many of them athletics. It's only because of these icons that we are able to get them there. So all of this has to work together to, to produce that sporting ecosystem.
You think sports excellence should not be viewed in isolation. It has to be a integral program and a broader impact that sport can make in a community. In fact, I wanted to go to the excellence theme, but I will just still stay on the education theme for a bit. And maybe have you at least tell us some work that you are trying to do within Trust now on the education side? Because we know you, Trust, from excellence standpoint, not from education and development of the kind that you mentioned. So just want to understand any experiment that you're doing and how is that shaping up so far?
So from last year itself, Parinda, we've started integrating physical literacy in education. I mean, we've had an extensive education program across the country till now. But as you said, somewhere we had kept education and sports a little separate. So though integrating in some way, very minimalistic overlap, but now we are looking at full integration. So anywhere we are running an education program at the primary age, where we have interventions with the government schools, where we are doing teacher training. Majority of the programs are through teacher training, and providing them with the libraries or resources for better training or teaching. So TLM, as we call it, teaching learning material. So that's where we are saying now, just as math, language, science are subjects on which we are helping teachers train children better or teach children better, physical literacy becomes one extra component, which is again something which they have to teach engaged children. We've conducted some pilot trainings in Uttarakhand, and I've been conducting those trainings with the teachers there, school teachers, primary teachers who are already having so many things on their plate. So we were very apprehensive initially, don't know whether this additional topic will be looked on as a burden or something like that. But thankfully, the way we presented, where we said that look at it as a way in which you can teach academics, not just as a separate additional topic, and that's how we developed the curriculum, where we're saying that let's teach them some addition or subtraction or multiplication or language or geography or environmental science using simple games and activities which they can engage in, which does not require any infrastructure, which does not require any equipment, zero equipment, if you ask me. We can do with whatever is available with us. So it can be taught anywhere, any place. Just a small room, figure out a way, and then, so that's the way we want to build our physical literacy program integrated with education across the country. This year, the coming year, the next years, we are planning to expand to Jharkhand, Odisha, Rajasthan, 3 other geographies. Continue with the pilot because, well, every geography has its own nuances. I mean, I can't exactly apply same formula everywhere. We'll have to bring in a different smaller changes there. But we look at these 3-4 geographies and see, and then develop something which can be, scaled across the country. So that's the plan, which I hope that another 2-3 years, we will have physically illiterate children getting into the secondary schools, where then the next thing would be the physical educators there will have a better, qualified or capable or able children, so that they can train them in multiple sports and get better talents there.
Very interesting. In fact, NEP, New Education Policy, last year that was launched by the central government, I think that speaks of experiential learning, that speaks of learning through physical activity and sport and play a lot. In fact, we've been also involved with some state governments in creating this pedagogy, this curriculum, where mainstream teachers can teach the subject through sport and play in some form. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out for you, because I think that's one new area that I think which is coming up. The other part was on the developmental theme. Life skills. You mentioned that whether it's gender, whether it is youth development, leadership. Has it been limited to that excellence program itself, or you are trying something outside of that as well?
No, no. In fact, we want to take it to grassroots as well. In fact, even if you're talking about physical, right from physical literacy, right from the school programs and the grassroots programs, we want to have those components embedded within any engagement that we do with the children. The depth of it could be different. I mean, at the physical literacy level, the depth. I mean, we know that okay, if we're able to give them opportunities where they are more comfortable with their body. We teach them basic skills, develop those fundamental movement skills so that they can play games better. So developing confidence is a simple outcome, a life skill outcome that we can look at from a physical literacy program. From a grassroots where the engagement is more, where it is more focused on a particular sport, then you have those many, you could focus upon 4 or 5 more life skills through which those can be developed. And in an excellence a residential program, of course, the depth is more, where we focus more on personality. We'll have mental training sessions. We'll have career opportunity, career counseling guidance given. I would say the depth of the life skill programs differs based on the level that we are, but we definitely want it integrated at all levels.
Let me now just move to this other excellence pathway that you mentioned, and you spoke of physical literacy, grassroots sports, and elite sports. Now, based on our experience, and I think all these categories seem to exist by themselves in large silos, and there are various players in each silo just focused on that. What we need is a pathway which is more a sports journey of a child mapped to that. So how are you solving that puzzle as part of your work, and maybe with government and other partners in some form?
So initially we tried to solve it all by our own.
Okay.
Our Jharkhand hockey initiative, the way we started in first point, we said, okay, let us do grassroots, let us do the competitive training setup, let us do the excellence. So we were doing all 3 programs and trying to build that gap on our own. But it's not scalable, and it does require a lot of resources. And some point of time, I mean, sustenance is definitely a big question. So what happens if we do everything on our own? Suddenly, because of whatever reasons, I mean, COVID was an eye opener for everybody, right? I mean, suddenly the funds for sports just became less important. I mean, there were other important things that required the funds, and then they were all routed. And then we suddenly said, oh, now I have no money for my sports program. So along the way, anyways, I mean, COVID happened later, but before that also we realized that we need to look at other ways and means to which we can create this pathway. And it's not necessary that everything we have to do it on our own. We have to look at existing institutions, organizations in the environment with whom we can partner and then develop a program. So our Mizoram badminton program was an excellent example. We started off partnering with the government as well as the sporting association, the Mizoram Badminton Association, and the community. I mean, all the 4 major components. And we said, let's develop a program together where initially we support everything, but sooner or later we build capacities of the local communities, we build capacities of the association, and at some point of time the ownership is then taken up by the community or the association to run these programs, even if we move out. So that's the badminton program, where we have grassroots, we have a competitive training center, again co-owned. Both of these components are co-owned by the association and the community. We raised some funds right from the beginning by having some fees, applying some fees, which again the community collected. It's nothing, as a trust we did not take in any penny. So let the community decide what the fees should be, let them collect it, let them use it for their own infrastructure development. or for equipment or whatever, right? And that's how we said that let's try and make a sustainable program. Odisha is another example where we, right from the beginning, we partnered with the government to use existing infrastructure. Jharkhand, we prepared our own infrastructure. We created our own NTHA academy right from scratch. The turf was laid by us. The academy was constructed by Tata Steel. Odisha, we said government infrastructure was already there. Two FIH approved international turfs, a stadium, a hostel set up. So then in Odisha, we partnered with the Odisha government, used their infrastructure and put up our own program to run the grassroots and the excellence. The competitive layer, we again said, let's partner with the government sports hostels. Let's build the capacity of the existing uh, organizations there, the coaches there, so that the grassroots get into the sports hostels, the best of the sports hostels, and get into our NTHA academy. So as a learning from our Jharkhand program, we said, okay, let's do away with one, and then we improved on that. So that's how we are learning. So even now, anywhere else that we go, we know that ideally we will not be in a position to set up all the 3 layers. So start looking at these partners from day one. So try and engage with the sports bodies, either the associations or the government sports bodies, institutions which have been running and doing some excellent work in sports. Our Himottan sports program is one such example where, again, we've tried to partner with NIVH, again, something nobody's heard about, a National Institute of Visually Handicapped blind sports. So we're trying to develop sports for blind children, again, for holistic development as well as competitive excellence. But partnering with such organizations where whatever we put in, if we leave, the work we have done can continue to be taken up by other organizations.
Right.
So it's just an open I would say request or to everybody here, whoever are listening to this podcast, that it's important now to start collaborating, because India is a huge, vast country. There's just not possible for anybody to do everything. But there are specialists. There are specialists who are working only at the grassroots. So can we? When there has to be somebody who takes ownership and say, okay, let's connect them to those who are working with excellence. So some of them have the sports CSR mandate. They're working with the excellence centers. We just need to figure a way how to make those connections. And you can't leave the government out. I mean, however difficult or easy it might be, you need to, because they are there everywhere. But we definitely need to try and, because we don't want to create parallel structures. At some point of time, there will be a conflict at somewhere or the other, especially if you are creating competitive players. So you have a government competitive player and you have a private competitive player, and somewhere there's a state, they have to get the best out. So it's good if you can engage with them and work with them and see if you can build something together rather than as an opposition.
That helps. And I have two follow-up questions on that. One was, you mentioned about this partnership, and no one entity can handle the scale and the opportunity that might be there in this. So, like-minded people coming together. I know we've been ourselves talking on some impact evaluation assessment kind of work where we can help each other in some form. But more importantly, I think, let's say if there's an organization which has a focus on grassroots, and you just mentioned that, and you have been able to create, let's say, a pathway, in this case, a 3-tiered structure that you speak of, is there a way for them to leverage it? Would you be open to look at a pipeline coming from them, which is using your pathway in some form? How does that work? Because we find that that's where it breaks in some form.
Yeah. I mean, we are open to it, definitely. In fact, it works either ways. I mean, either we are running an excellence program. Of course, no. As of today, if you ask me, we've been looking at only our grassroots program, because even that's a bigger pipeline,
Right.
But there is no, even for our Mizoram, for that matter. I'm happy to share that we've got around 11 players from Mizoram, the best in the age group of 12 to 16, placed in 2 of the top academies in the country. And there we did not restrict it to only the players who are part of our academies. Kept it open to anybody else, anyone who is practicing even in a private academy or the other centers there. So any program that we are working where there is no restriction that nobody else can come in. We're always open to take in. I think I would say the best talent is what we want to give an opportunity to from the region. That's about it. So, yeah. So very much open to that. And as I said, it should be work the either way around. So somewhere we are running a grassroots program, and somebody else has an excellence academy, and that's what we would like to do there.
And in your experience, now let me ask a tougher question. How open has been the government or the state when you have gone to them to integrate the whole structure around that? And what has been your any insights to other people who are trying similar efforts in different parts of the country?
It's been mixed. It's been
Okay.
mixed. It's been there have been successes. There has been. I mean, see, everywhere where we were welcomed. I wouldn't say that it was nobody heard us out. That is uh, but yeah, the pace at which we could take the next step probably has differed based on state to state. Some of the states have been very proactive, and Odisha being an excellent example where, I mean, they have a focus to develop sports, and hence they were more open. And so, if we said something, the next day or within a week, it was done. So that is the pace which has really helped us achieve a lot in that state, and we can see the progress there. In some other states, it's been more. It
Slower.
just takes a little time. Yeah, it just takes
Correct.
slower. So, but as I keep repeating, whether you like it or not, I mean, whether it's easy or difficult, it's important to engage with the government, and I really uh, uh, request any government official sitting there that they please share, because it has to be collaborative. There is with such a huge country, no single organization institute can create a sports person. You need you need multiple people working together. So let's make effective use of our own resources. There's limitations, right? The government has their own limitations, we have our own. But if we try and mix and match and say, okay, you have your strengths and I have my strengths, can we pull those strengths together? I'm sure we can do we can have better outcomes than we struggling to do everything on our own. That's the appeal, I think, I
Sure.
would say, and
Sure.
a request.
Well, that's motivating. Uh, just one, you have mentioned about long-term investments in communities like Jharkhand, Odisha, Mizoram. Uh, how do you view exiting or transitioning out of a certain community after you have invested or stayed invested there for a while? How do you plan that? Because that's something which runs in minds of many funding partners as well, in terms of how long should you stay invested and what makes a program sustainable, let's say even after you exit the community.
I wish I had a formula for it. There is no one formula which can be applied everywhere else. I will again state the example of Mizoram, because that's one program where we will be exiting. The plans are already out. So we had a 3-year intervention, out of which unfortunately 1.5 years was eaten away by COVID.
Okay.
But in spite of that, uh, we were running 40 centers, 40 grassroots centers across the state. Out of 40, after our exit from the next academic year, at least 20 centers will run on their own.
Interesting.
So I would say that it's still a good achievement if 50% running. So now we are looking at in the next phase, I would say. We say that, okay, let me just try and see if I can support those 20 centers in a minimalistic way of providing them better equipment, or some more coach education, or some such smaller elements, not a full-fledged. So I don't pay salaries of the coaches, right? That's the biggest thing which we say, that the community has to own it, figuring out. So they could do that, because we had put levied fees for the children right from day one, which also I think is important, because normally CSR companies, or any company for that matter, if since it's funding, they'll say, let me do everything, so it's free for the community, for everybody, right? But then the question is, once they're used to
Sure.
do something without any cost, then it's very difficult to inculcate that thought of, oh, now I have to pay fees and do the same thing. So then that kind might fizzle away. That's my experience there. So I think it's important to see if we can have uh, some kind of, so and always it need not be money in kind, there could be some kind of a support from the community, at least making infrastructure, maintaining it in some way, uh, in whatever way. So, and that that solution will differ from state to state, place to place, based on how things are. Jharkhand, where we're working, the tribal and the Naxalite regions in the interiors, very difficult for us if we ask them payment, or if they have to pay fees. But I've seen, I don't know whether you heard about Simdega, the villages in again in Jharkhand. There are schools there where uh, it's mandatory to bring a hockey stick to the school. You have to
Yeah.
have. And the children, the parents there, of course, can't pay money, but they pay in kind. They provide food. They provide portion, I mean, grains or rice or whatever is cultivated at home to the school. And the children are taught in hockey as well as educated there. So there are different ways, and where we'll need to figure out answers to the sustainability angle, and see what works in that region, and apply them. But you're very right in saying that we need to think about it from the inception. If we say that let me do it, and then 3 years later we think about it, nothing is impossible. But I feel it's just more difficult, because it's the attitude, or the mindset of the people participating, that's a little difficult, I feel, to change.
Right.
uh, uh, there.
Very insightful. This, getting them to support the community support, whether in cash or kind, I think is an important aspect, because that gets you skin in the game right from day one.
Correct.
Otherwise, it becomes difficult. So that's a great insight. Just down to last 1 or 2 points I had in mind. One was you mentioned about COVID wiping away a lot of work that. So any learnings, any patterns that you have seen, let's say positive patterns because of COVID that we have tried or you have tried, and which you think will linger on and will help you go forward as well in growing the idea of sport in some form or the other.
I think one of the best things that's happened because of COVID is bringing in technology to sports. Many of the coaches were averse to using technology. Sports coaches especially, they said, "Jo bhi karenge, they will do it on the ground or in the court. Don't tell us to use this thing and sit in front of the." But that has changed. That has changed, and now that mindset has changed. So with that, I think we definitely, in some way or the other, have been able to curtail costs of programs. I mean, workshops, online workshops. Who would have thought that we could ever have taught any sport, for that matter, online? But we did it everywhere. We did. I mean, all different kinds of sports. And badminton, we had the best of the best. Pulela Gopichan training our players in Mizoram online, through some giving them tips and techniques, and we developed programs. We were able to develop some kind of videos. Otherwise, getting the coaches to develop anything on software was a big task. You know it as well as I do. Getting them to write curriculum is or techniques or drills is a huge task. But we said, okay, don't write, just make them. Right? That's what we innovated and said, okay, just shoot yourself and make those small quick videos, and then disseminate it and let the kids observe and play. So there was this thought process of being so I would say our training costs definitely uh, were reduced, and we could still do something in spite of not being able to be physically present. Secondly, I think somewhere we were able to, the COVID period has seen a lot of individuals engaging in physical activity in sports in the past 2 years, right? So, which is the most important thing, I think, to develop healthy individuals. That drive has to be within themselves. So we just have to equip them, figure out ways and means in which they can know how to train themselves and do it the right way, follow it. I mean, I'm sure there are pluses and minuses there, because there are so many things on the internet today, so many and different ways to learn anything. what is right, what is wrong is always a dilemma. But we just have to develop those individuals who can think on their own. So that's the reason I feel that physically literate youth, if we can develop, who understands the basics of physical activity, um, and then the sky is the limit. They can look up any video online and learn on their own. So there is no limitation that I need to have a coach, or they can just learn wherever they are, learn those tricks and tips. And there are ways where they can put it out to the public too, because of this Instagram and all of those social media posts where it is more reachable to the public. So I would say these are the 2 3 most important things, which is positives that I feel has happened. uh,
Great points. I think the whole coach capacity building, I think, while the whole sport has been a bit dormant last couple of years, but it's a great plus, which I think you just highlighted that. The last point, Nilam, I had before we let you go today was on, just COVID has made us think very creatively, very differently than we all used to earlier. Any other predictions you might have, any key trends next couple of years, dopey ideas that you think will get tried out? We might discuss on a panel opportunity like this 2 years from now.
uh, I mean, as I said, I believe that at some point of time, the necessity of having a training institute, will just go away, and I can train myself if I have the right. I just need to know, have the knowledge. I would say
Sure,
knowledge is
sure.
important to be able to make that point. So uh, already you can see that the players today, as compared to the players 10, 12 years ago, I wouldn't say just COVID, but yeah, the trend that we have seen where they know more, they ask questions, they need to know why it is happening, and which is that why is important. And somewhere if we are able to get that why, or to the players as to why they should be doing it, if they understand this, there would be a time where you would have many competitors out there who are self-developed, or self-trained, as we say. We just need to have opportunities where we can tap them. Um, they are coming up. I mean, today you can register on websites. Government, Khelo India has some schemes out there where you can register an institute or a player, and then uh, maybe there will be technology will help them validate, or eligibility criteria, as we speak about. That's still identifying talent. So there would be ways in which uh, uh, by an app or something, I should be able to identify whether I am rate myself as a player, and that rating gets picked up, and then you have a talent scouting sitting there,
Sure, sure.
and they identify players right from there. By not, I don't need to go anywhere today. So many opportunities are lost because the players from the rural regions do not get those opportunities for talent scouting, right? So either the institutes cannot reach them, or the players cannot get there. So with technology, and with technology reaching down right to the uh, uh, village level, that can just come up, and that will just
Sure.
open up a whole new response. I mean, whole new thing for talent ID, and then So I feel that could be that could be very interesting to thing to happen.
Great points here. I think, and I mean, I would just say, I mean, hopefully that happens, and technology is here to stay. Digital is here to stay. So thank you so much, Neelam. In fact, let me just summarize some of the key points, at least takeaways from me from this session. One is aligning sport into your core mandate as an organization. What are the different ways you could do that, whether it is education, whether it is life skills, or it is employment opportunities or youth development. I think we touched upon those areas. The grassroots to elite sports pathway, collaboration opportunities, working with state and partners, implementing organizations partnering with themselves based on where your focus is going to be helpful. And we will invite some of you who have programs or opportunities like that to write to us, and happy to discuss, come on the table and talk about that. Beyond the physicality of sport, how can you do learning through sport and play, whether it is educational outcomes or developmental outcomes, is another piece I think we touched upon. And lastly, the idea of digital and technology, how that can be leveraged as part of the, thanks to COVID, and now all of us are very upbeat about that. And Neelam kind of mentioned about that, and I'm assuming she's using a lot of that in trust work at this point, and hopefully we'll continue to use and accelerate that as we go. So thanks again. We do not have a Q&A session in this, but if you want to write to us, talk to us, end of the session, there will be contact details available here. So please make note of that and send us your inputs and or any opportunity that you think we should discuss. This brings us to the close of the session. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you, Neelam, once again for giving us such an absorbing session and for your time. More powers to you and Tata Trust for continue to grow the cause of sport in the country. Until we have you again.
Thanks, Parminder. I love being here, and thank you, Sports Village, for having me here. I mean, it's always great to engage in these conversations, but it will be better, or it will be more awesome if we can follow up these conversations with more active, focused group discussions, and which culminate in action.
Sure.
I'm so happy to connect with that.
So we await some of the participants also. If you want to get involved in action, please write to us and we'll get Neelam on the table and we'll discuss what might be possible through these collaborative opportunities. Thank you once again, everybody, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you.